For the purposes of this presentation, I want to focus on performance appraisals within the nonprofit and public sector. I think that it's something that most employees, most managers are going to come across in their daily um, jobs. So I think it's something that everybody should kind of have a background knowledge in and kind of have an understanding for. This topic should definitely be interesting to all public and nonprofit organizations because of the need to retain employees um, and the associated costs of turnover. So the biggest thing with these performance appraisals is we're seeing a very high turnover associated with them because of the lack of knowledge going into them by managers and the issues we're kind of facing because of that. So, of course, by reducing turnover, an organization can reduce costs by not having to spend time to hire and train new employees. And of course, time spent by managers training can now be spent doing additional tasks or work to make the organization more efficient and so on. What I want to highlight the most out of this specific topic is, the idea that a great performance appraisal can allow for more productive employees who consistently meet and exceed expectations. And I think that this is a really important topic for any, supervisor, department head, anything like that, because this, essentially can make or break an employee. We see a high turnover rate if, employees go into a performance appraisal unprepared. They don't feel like it's transparent. So understanding this and creating that system that, is clear and concise is really going to help keep employees and keep them positive and productive. So I want to just kind of start out with, what is a performance appraisal? So essentially it's just a method by which the job performance of an employee is documented and evaluated. And it's just a regular review of an employee's job performance and overall contribution to a company. Most organizations use performance appraisals to give employees big picture feedback on their work, as well to justify pay increases and bonuses, as well as termination decisions. I think you see a lot of times these performance appraisals used in organizations by supervisors or, higher department heads and stuff like that. Whereas, day-to-day reviews or day-to-day conversations and constructive criticism is going to happen on that lower level from that, direct supervisor, direct manager. So typically what we see is performance appraisals happening on a larger scale with, higher up individuals being involved. So a big question is, why are they important? Performance reviews have become a way to share positive and negative feedback about an employee's work performance. We typically see them over the course of the year. It allows for more productive employees who consistently meet and exceed expectations. And it also allows for a better managerial system that enforces constructive criticism in a positive manner. So essentially, performance appraisals and reviews keep managers accountable for their employees. So by having this set in place, they can keep themselves accountable to make sure their employees are hitting goals, hitting expectations, and so on. So this allows for that better system kind of all the way around. So I want to talk through a little bit of the current issue that we're kind of facing. So we see a lot of times in nonprofits and the public and private sector that performance appraisals are not done correctly. And we're seeing employees, leave feeling upset, anxious, and we see a higher turnover rate when these appraisals are not done correctly. And as I said before, turnover means a higher cost for hiring, training, and whatnot. So essentially, the lower the turnover, the better cost savings that organization can save. So the current system used by the majority of nonprofits and the public sector is known as the GE quantitative system. So it's essentially built as like a ranking system to rank employees and weed out low performers. The biggest problem that I've kind of seen with this is it's essentially been known to prioritize what is best for the organization rather than the employee. So it's essentially intended as a way to make sure team members are meeting their employer's expectations and furthering the organization's success. But what we're seeing a lot is this system leaves workers feeling more disheartened by the process than empowered. Plus, they only happen once a year, and it's complicated by recency bias. And these annual reviews don't typically give the most accurate picture of the employee's overall performance. So there's kind of a lot of different issues plaguing this system, and it does need to be reevaluated at the core. So starting, off with it, essentially what needs to happen is there does need to be a clear and concise HR team. So I've seen within a lot of organizations that I've been a part of is there is no HR department. There is, maybe someone who kind of works through, time off or, salary and hours and stuff like that. But there really is no dedicated person to deal with this kind of, HR system. And, that's essentially irresponsible because HR's responsibility is to make sure, the employees are protected. And unfortunately, I've seen it in many cases where that's just not, happening because there is no, department, in place there. So the biggest thing is just making sure that process is simple and does not take too much time. So, how do you create this performance appraisal that is not overly complicated, can be used by different managers, different heads, different supervisors, and make sure that the employee understands what is being asked of them and what goals and expectations they are expected to hit. So that's the biggest thing I think we're seeing, or what we're not seeing within organizations, and that needs to be corrected. So what do managers in general do wrong? So the biggest thing I've come across is these annual reviews. So annual reviews, are good in the sense that, they save time. You're not doing it every month or every 6 months or whatever that may be. They save time for the manager, but they don't help the employee. And at the end of the day, the employee is the one working and creating that production and doing that low-lying stuff that is, essentially running the organization. So these annual reviews are just not, unfortunately, working for them. There's also, if we continue with the annual reviews, I find that I see a lot of passive aggressiveness when it comes down to what's supposed to be constructive criticism. So talking about, toxic workplace, if we're seeing annual reviews, we're not seeing any oversight by managers. That typically means there is no good managerial system, which most likely means we're seeing passive aggressiveness because we're seeing, managers maybe not being able to confront or have confrontation issues. Another very large issue that I'm seeing quite frequently, both within my current position, my current job, as well as other organizations, is there's no clear job descriptions. So a lot of times we're seeing employees enter into positions with, a quick summary of what they're supposed to be doing, when in reality, that's not anything than what they're actually doing once they enter in that position. So a clear, concise, accurate job description is absolutely necessary to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And it has to be transparent. I see a lot of times with, employees versus supervisors is there's no transparency. The supervisor expects one thing and the employee, does not realize that is expected of them. So having that transparency, that open communication is definitely something that I've seen quite frequently to becoming an issue. So, how can we kind of fix this? So, clearly this is an issue. Most organizations are facing this issue. What can we do here? The biggest thing is, creating a more efficient and effective means for performance appraisals. Like I said before, there needs to be a clear and concise HR department. Without that, you're not going to have that system. You're not going to be able to create that system in place to make sure employees are getting the necessary feedback. And then, of course, like I said, earlier, is creating those clear and concise job descriptions for each and every employee within the organization. So one thing that I've seen quite frequently as well is, you have this generic position, you have that job description for that. However, that when that person enters in, they're kind of, flipping around a little bit, adding, different duties, removing different responsibilities. So that HR department, that HR representative, their responsibility needs to be, okay, go in, figure out exactly what this person's responsibilities are throughout the day. That way we can create correct goals and expectations of this employee that we, of course, not call off guard. And another thing that that I think would be super helpful in this situation is making sure we're having discussions with supervisors and department heads, so that the descriptions offer a complete picture of the position. A lot of times there's more to a position than what meets the eye. So whether that be something that they don't typically do but is expected of them, maybe it's a responsibility that you're expected to do once a month or whatnot. So maybe the HR department doesn't see it, but having that discussion with the supervisor, they can go ahead and confirm that that is actually what is required. I think a lot of times we're seeing nonprofits and organizations in the public sector, with high turnover, workplace toxicity, anxious and stressed employees, and honestly just poor company morale. And this is all because honestly they don't have a proper performance review in place. There's more than half of millennials have reacted to a performance review by looking for a new job, complaining to coworkers, and 15% of them admitting to crying. I think as we enter into this new age, kind of enter in this new idea and mentality of the importance of mental health, I think appraisals and reviews are really kind of the cornerstone of this. I think a lot of times, statistics show that 3 out of 5 employees call out sick the day of their performance review because they're just so ridden with anxiety, which is just not healthy, absolutely at all. So that's just kind of something that I think that conversation needs to be had on how we can kind of fix it. And I think every organization should self-reflect and kind of figure out what they can do to be better. And then a couple other things just I think that would are absolutely relevant to this conversation is employees should just be absolutely fully aware of the performance appraisal process. One of the things that I like to do in my organization is making sure in the hiring process we make it very clear the expectations, of course, of the job, but also the expectations of the managers. So I've got a manager who is required to do weekly reviews with our new hires. I've got one of our bosses who does monthly reviews. So setting the expectation that you will be reviewed, you will be you will make sure that we're meeting and exceeding those expectations. And I also want to make sure they feel comfortable meeting and exceeding those expectations as well. Sorry about that. It decided to pop up on me here. Get that out of there. But the biggest thing I think as well is to reshape those negative connotations associated with performance reviews. So as I talked about earlier, a lot of employees just absolutely are terrified of these performance reviews, which should not be the case. It should be one of those things that employees maybe not necessarily look forward to, but something that they should be willing to accept. Maybe not excited for the feedback, but willing to take that feedback, and know that it's only for the purpose of bettering them and growing and helping them grow to leaders and strong individuals within the organization. So I think that kind of sums up a little bit about performance appraisals, and kind of why they're so important. I think if you had to take 2 lessons away from this training here, it's going to have to be the idea that performance appraisal process should be consistently reviewed. So things are constantly changing in HR, in the daily lives of individuals. So constantly keeping that process efficient, and effective. So things might change where communication styles change. So making sure we're keeping up to date with expectations, in that sense. I also think it's also really important to keep in mind how important it is that turnover is a direct result of poor management or workplace toxicity. So if you're experiencing a high turnover, there's a reason. I think a lot of companies just have that mentality that high turnover rates means that just people aren't fitting in. It's on them, but there's always a reason behind it. If we can get to the bottom of it, it's going to save an organization a lot of time and money. Um, so that's, I think, definitely a little bit about performance appraisals, and their importance in that sense. So I hope that sums up your kind of understanding of this, and I appreciate you guys watching this. Thank you.